Шановні пані та панове, Прем'єр-міністр України Володимир Гройсман.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Volodymyr Groysman.
Volodymyr Groysman.
Good morning. Dear friends, I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to use this respected forum to talk about Ukraine, about global challenges, about achievements, about issues, and about going forward. I think this is very important to make an assessment at where we are at, what are the objectives that we are facing. I do remember my first presentation here in my first months coming to the office of the Prime Minister. I was talking about objectives for that year, and today we can draw some of the lessons and achievements. We can assess what has been done and also talk about the future, which is very important. Separately, I would like to emphasize that as a Prime Minister and as a leader of the team of the government, at that time, we had the government of the task of ensuring macroeconomic stability in a very difficult condition. For the last 3 years, we had unprecedented challenges facing us. It is difficult to find a country who would have accumulated so many problems over the decades, and over the decades of lost opportunities, I think, where we had to then rebuild our energy system and get rid of our dependency on the aggressor state, which interfered into our borders, where we were forced to change and shift from our traditional markets and start institutional transformation to build the new Ukrainian state. And this road is not simple at all. And as I said a year ago, we managed to ensure macroeconomic stability. We managed to continue our cooperation with international partners, with IMF, which is indeed very important in our current conditions and in the challenges that we're facing. We began economic growth, which is not sufficient, of course, but when I'm talking to international partners during the meetings, especially those who know the background, know the history of our country, they always emphasize that our country has had several chances. Chances when we were overcoming the crisis, when we could start the growth. We had a chance to sustain this development and make these changes irreversible. Then they would stop, the populism would prevail, and for the last 10 years, as I said, are the years of lost opportunities, where the economy in 2004, 2005 was growing. We were to undertake these institutional reforms, and then we would have had a totally different situation now. But the reality is as it is, and we have to open our eyes to it, and we have to make sure that these changes are irreversible. The speeding up economic growth is important, and we need to both undertake institutional changes, continue them, and embark on new reforms. We're talking about large-scale privatization, pension reform, land reform in our country, strengthening our energy independence, and all of that put together nowadays is quite realistic, that can make a difference. Therefore, starting this discussion, I would like to emphasize that I do believe in the bright future of our country, and I'm totally sure that we will succeed, no matter what we hear, and especially those who say that that's it, that's the end, there's no hope. They are not fair in terms of the assessment of Ukraine, and I do hope that today we will talk about this. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. It is a pleasure for me to have this opportunity again to sit with you and ask you some questions, and I hope too, if we have time, we'll get some questions from our audience. But I do thank you for taking my questions first. Let me begin by telling you what I've heard in Ukraine over the last few days and what I hear consistently in this country. That is that people believe your instincts are good. They believe that you are committed to reform, but they also believe, and I'll be blunt, they believe that you ultimately are the president's man, that you have close ties to him, that you do not have an independent power base, and you do not have the capacity to deliver on the promises you make. How do you respond to that?
They are exaggerating my dependency, first of all. I think, well, the question is not quite proper when someone is talking whose man I am, you know, or whose man someone else is. We have to talk about values, about objectives, and I think we have a lot to show over the last, the results of the previous year, but I think, but I think the most important is that today, in this important historic moment, we would all be united, the President, the Parliament and the government. We have nothing to divide. We have to fight not for the power, but we have to fight for our country. And I think we have to prove this to Ukrainian society, that we are capable of making these irreversible changes and that they will make the life different. For better for the whole country. This is the set of objectives for us, and I'm always more optimistic than compared to those who are more skeptical looking at our country.
I understand the optimism and the need to be optimistic, but I also understand that the Ukrainian people judge on results. So let's talk specifically about deeds, not words. Let's start with the energy sector. The energy sector, according to most Ukrainians, works in the interests of a few vastly rich Ukrainian oligarchs, not in the interests of the nation and its people. And the feeling is that all the talk of reform of the energy sector is talk and isn't really being delivered. Your response to that?
Let's talk about specific things, what we managed to do over this last year. And I would like to emphasize again that we managed to stop this economic downfall and start the growth. We are more than 600 days without the Russian gas, and we began to create conditions for a real energy market which was not there in the past. But to say that the market is already there is too premature, because a lot of things have to be done to make sure it happens. But the full-fledged deregulation was a very powerful anti-corruption step. The price deregulation, this is a fact on the gas market. The fact that we start building up the production of Ukrainian gas is true, and we will have about 700 million cubic meters of gas for Ukraine. This is a big number. The fact that we are undertaking a systemic corporatization of Naftogaz is true. We are working on unbundling Naftogaz. These are all the steps that will bring ultimately to proper conditions of normal development of the energy sector. And I think we need to establish the energy market one way or another, and the fact that our generating companies are already trading their gas already on the internal stock exchange means that the process of demonopolization of that market is in the making. But we need to speed up. I totally agree.
We have to talk about corruption, because if there is one element in Ukraine that people constantly refer to when they talk about the failings of this country, it is corruption. We've spoken before, and I've asked you to tell me how many of the, to use a phrase, big fish, the very most powerful business people in this country who have faced allegations of corruption, how many big fish have been not just investigated, but put before a court and, if found guilty, convicted and locked up? How many big fish have been caught in what your government describes as a consistent anti-corruption drive?
Thank you. The government task is not the criminal persecution of someone, but institutionally fight the corruption. And I will speak about this. In terms of criminal persecution in Ukraine, we established all the anti-corruption infrastructure, NABU, National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, the NACP, so that infrastructure is there and it starts working. There is legislation that allows us to work quite well. The only weakness are Ukrainian courts. Nowadays in Ukrainian courts there are more than 3,000 corruption cases that are not moving forward. There's no decision of the judges, and that's a big issue, and I'm ready to talk about this. I know that you were discussing this as well, but I do believe that we need to decisively put the end on this process and create the accessible independent judiciary, because otherwise all of this fight of the specialized bodies will be brought to nil, and we can't allow that. We can't afford this. And I do believe that we will witness the court decisions against the big fish corruptionists. In terms of the competency of the government, we need to establish the institutional conditions. So over the last year, we made several powerful steps, strong anti-corruption steps. We have deregulated the energy sector. No one now is artificially setting the price for gas inside the country. That allows to have a very strong anti-corruption movement forward. From the 1st of August, I mentioned this last year, we introduced the Prozoro system that has always been confined from the real business, and it will always be corrupting. Now this procurement area is open. I think market participants can speak to that. We have introduced electronic declaration. We open up all databases regarding beneficiary owners, which can be traced now, who owns what, including civil service. We started the path for deregulation. Only over the last year, we have cancelled more than 600 regulations that were the basis of that corruption. And of course, we need to move on and to do the purging of the state-owned companies sector. So there's a lot of things to do, in other words.
An interesting list of commitments that you've already made and policies that you're pursuing. But let me just ask you two very specific questions. The President addressed us yesterday. He made it plain that he does not believe in the anti-corruption court. At least he indicated that it's taken so long for you to deliver a new Supreme Court and to get the justices appointed that he doesn't believe in the realistic future the anti-corruption court is going to happen. Do you share that view?
I think that we need to establish quickly an instrument that would allow to do justice against the corruptioners. And it's an important, and whether it is called an independent anti-corruption chamber or an anti-corruption court, it doesn't matter. It does
matter, forgive me for interrupting, but it does matter to so many Ukrainians. I mean, we heard members, the anti-corruption brigade in the parliament last night telling us this is one of the key decisions that your government will be judged by, whether you are prepared to fulfill your commitments to an anti-corruption court.
I do support the establishment of the anti-corruption court or anti-corruption chamber, but I would like to emphasize that this is extremely important for this to be done quickly and for it to be independent, because in my opinion, I mean, you can call it anything, you can call it a chamber, a court or anything else, but if it is dependent, if they will be dependent in vetting process from other institutions, it's not going to work. We created NABU. NABU is totally independent. I take the commitment as a Prime Minister to ensure automatic funding and maintenance for these anti-corruption structures. There are two elements. The laws are there, the anti-corruption infrastructure. We need the court that would make the ruling against big fish, as you call them, among others, because we can't proceed like that. Because if you ask the question, is there corruption in the country? Yes, there is. If you ask the question, are there less sectors where this corruption prevails? Yes, there are less sectors where this corruption prevails. And the most important is the timeline, to be quicker in establishing them and bring them to justice.
All right, well, that's an interesting message you're putting out there. Your voice matters, Prime Minister, because you're the head of the government. And if you look at the surveys of Ukrainian public opinion, and you know the government isn't hugely popular right now, but the people of this country don't just believe that corruption is a huge problem in the different business sectors. They also believe corruption is a problem in the heart of politics itself. Now, not so long ago, on Ukrainian TV, we saw a Ukrainian parliamentarian, a politician, asking for a substantial bribe on camera. That politician, as I understand it, is still sitting as an MP. Now, you're the Prime Minister, you're the head of the government. Just explain to me how that can happen, because symbols matter, and that seems to me to be a symbol of a system that doesn't really ever take corruption seriously.
Well, the symbol is that today a lot of members of the parliament are stripped of their immunity in order to be investigated seamlessly and to be brought to justice. I can't put the tag on them who is guilty or not. From what I have seen in the open sources, the information regarding the corruption investigation, I'm also astonished by this, and I would like to emphasize that I think that everyone who is to blame has to be punished. This is not the issue of popular words, it's about the essence and our success. So in all possible ways, I will facilitate the anti-corruption bodies to work in this legal field to make sure that this justice happens. And separately, I would like to say that I'm interested in the changes to happen inside the government. This is why with civil society, about less than 1 year ago, we started on this joint initiative of anti-corruption in the governance system. We started doing this, and this is a fact. We started the reform of the civil service. We officially announced the call for proposals for 1,200 newcomers who can come and honestly change the country inside, from within, and that's extremely important. We started decentralization, we transferred the mandate and resources down to the local level, and that's very important anti-corruption step, because the corruption likes confinement, and decentralization in itself is a very strong system. There are entrepreneurs here, they can confirm that for the first time our government introduced the electronic VAT administering. VAT has always been a source of corruption, always. To get the VAT refund, for the last 10 years, you had to pay the kickback, and it was a huge problem. Now we have sorted it out. None of the businessmen are paying these kickbacks for that, and that's a strong anti-corruption message. At the beginning of that, we owed 15 billion. Only 900 million are left for this VAT refund. So dozenfold reduction in terms of influence of corruption on the real sector. We regulated 3,000 deregulations, billions of hryvnia that was used by businesses for some stupid things just to feed the bureaucrats. We started doing other steps which are very clear that will bring about results. Where is the question? You're mentioning the society. I do agree with you. I'm not satisfied myself with the real condition This year, starting from the 1st of January, we doubled the minimum salary. We went from downfall to the growth, but that's not enough. We need to talk about what is next. And in terms of what is next, I think we will take time to talk about what Ukraine will be like in 1 year from now. And I see that, among others, we'll be able to improve our economic growth and make this change irreversible. We need consolidated support here from the parliament to pass the laws. And I know as a prime minister how to make these laws happen in the real life and how these laws will influence the quality of services the citizens are receiving.
The subtitle of our conversation, Mr. Prime Minister, is Ukraine's reforms and the EU's role. So let's just for a minute think about perceptions of Ukraine in Europe. And I would suggest to you that over the last few weeks, when Europeans have read in their newspapers or heard on their radios, seen on their TVs news about Ukraine, a lot of that news has been about one particular individual, that is Mr. Mikhail Saakashvili. Now, I know that you have separation of powers. The fact that Mr. Saakashvili's citizenship was rescinded, revoked in this country was not your decision. But as Prime Minister, leader of the government, I wonder what your view is of a situation where you now find Mr. Saakashvili back in the country accusing the president and your government of being a bunch of crooks, saying that he's going to come to Kiev next week. He seems to have the support of some people, including some men in uniform who claim to be veterans. It is a very bizarre situation, and it, frankly, is refocusing attention on Saakashvili's message that this government is failing. Do you think it was a mistake, personally, to revoke his citizenship?
Я не побачив, якщо мова з кінця вашого запитання, я не побачив.
Starting from the end of your question, I had not seen any fundamental successes when Mr. Saakashvili was head of the regional administration in Odessa. By the way, I helped him in many ways, like in building roads. I do have a certain disappointment in his activities, and I think that the issue of citizenship at the moment is exclusively in the legal sphere, and I think that in any democratic country you should go along the legal way to define the legal status of a person. But I would like also to say that no one should be allowed, including myself, to organize chaos at the state border, more so to raise their hands against our Ukrainian bodyguards. And the third point, when I spoke, I said that as soon as we approach some successes, some real stuff, when we start to regain economically, when we start to really reform institutions, always Ukrainian populists in the political camp are using any moment in order to put the country back to chaos. But I would like to stress that I am not going to go along with these people. I came to the power in order to unite people, but not to ruin the country. And this is the difference between myself and such people. And I think that this crazy populism is always a big reason for any destabilization in our country. We should leave this behind. In our new Ukraine, in our new state, we should be guided by quality government and pragmatism.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd love to leave it behind, not least love to leave Mr. Saakashvili behind personally. But the fact is, he is now in the country, and as we understand it, he plans to be here in Kiev next week. So my simple question is, what are you and the government and the authorities in Ukraine going to do about this situation?
Нічого.
Nothing. Nothing. I don't know what we should do in such situation. I understand how we build roads, how we invest in the economy, how we create conditions for our energy independence, how to prepare the country to severe winter. I also know how to make the reform of pension system or health, public health. But whatever to do with populists, let the society deal with it. Whatever I do as a prime minister, together with my government, I will do in the name and in behalf of Ukrainians. And this is my normal position. I have spoken about this in this hall already, and I have not swerved from my ideology and my thoughts.
So the message of doing nothing is interesting. This is my last question on Mr. Saakashvili, but the man, according to the court's interpretation, is now an illegal immigrant. So this one individual who happens to be, according to the court's decision, an illegal immigrant is simply going to be allowed to make his life for as long as he wants inside this country, and you and your government are just going to leave him to it. Is that it?
Чому не будемо?
Why? We have a very balanced politics as far as migrants are concerned. We are acting within the framework of conventions and international law, which provide for the protection of rights of migrants in Ukraine. But I do emphasize that we do not want to do anything specific devoted to just one single person. I'm sure that at this conference we're paying too much attention to some issues that do not pertain to the development of our country.
One more question from me, then I'm going to open it up to everybody else. I've been coming to YES conferences for quite a number of years now, and every year the message is that yes, we've still got a lot of work to do, but we're going to speed up the reform program. We listen to our friends in Europe who want us to deliver the reforms quicker. We listen to the IMF, we listen to our partners overseas, and we know what we've got to do. I think most people would agree that you've made some progress, but an awful lot more needs to be done. How much longer do you think you've got before the message changes from, you know, we understand you're trying hard and it's difficult, and the message changes to, you're just not getting to where you need to be, and we in Europe, the rest of the world, are simply going to have to walk away from our helping you in Ukraine? How long have you got?
I remember when I have not spent too many years in central authority. I remember when I came to work as a prime minister, when I was appointed, I was given 6 months. And some people said that he will fall in 6 months, he will succeed in nothing. As we see, such forecasts have not materialized. And I can say that in the nearest 12 months, well, we have switched to strategic planning, and we have the plan of our activity, of the government activity until 2020. And within the next 12 months, I would like to do, for instance, the reform of the pension system. Next week, Ukraine is going to see the new just pension system, which is able to provide for macroeconomic stabilization. We have approached the reform of public health, and a couple of weeks ago the parliament has endorsed the reform of education. We have now a very ineffective and corrupted sector of state-owned companies. But if the legislation that we have submitted to the parliament is endorsed this year, then this will provide for the new way of managing these state-owned companies and also provide for the privatization of them. Yesterday I presented the draft budget for the next year, and we provide there for 3% rise in economy. Of course, this is not sufficient, but we see that through the adoption of several laws, or rather one law about privatization. These are revolutionary laws submitted by the government. This will provide the drops into the development of the national economy. You know, to break something is not to build something. You can break something very, very soon, but the effect of construction comes later. But I'm deeply convinced that every month, every year, people will start to feel that the situation is improving. There's a lot of pessimism in the society now, and I understand these people because they've been suffering for years, but I see the prospects for the development of Ukrainian economy. I see new jobs. We are going to new markets now. We had to leave the traditional Russian markets and switch to new markets. Today we have more than 44% of trade responsible for European Union, and very recently it amounted to only 37%. We have now new institutions to support investment, to support Ukrainian export. We are putting stimulating programs into our draft budget that are able to provide for the quality support of Ukrainian agriculture, which is now responsible for 16 to 17% of Ukrainian GDP. We have a lot to do in order to stabilize the situation, but we know how to do. We have to do capital repairs of the country. We have launched the realization of a number of infrastructure projects. People may say that we have launched the large-scale construction of roads in the country. We are doing a lot so that people feel that the things are changing. People need jobs, people need salary, and people need help from the state.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I've just filled my glass, and I'm sure you would agree the glass is half full, not half empty. That's a metaphor, I think, for the way you're seeing the state of the reform program in Ukraine today, and I well understand your optimism. I'm sure. Go on, you want to comment on the water?
Я тільки можу додати. Да-да.
I can only add something. I have opened this bottle, and before I poured it for myself, I poured some for you. Then you replenished it, and now you have even more than half a glass. And I think this is very symbolic, because together we can do what the society is expecting from us.
You also point out my very bad manners because I didn't replenish your glass too, so I'm ashamed of myself. All right, let's open up to questions. I'm sure there are many on the floor.
У нас владі завжди.
Well, you know, the authorities are often left in the cold in our country.
Start here and then we'll go over there. Go on, so give us your name and your question.
Adrian Karatnitsky with the Atlantic Council. My question is to both of you. Mr. Sackur, you showed your impatience and the impatience of the international community with a process involving a Ukrainian parliamentarian who was charged with corruption several months ago, but who is not currently in jail or is sitting in parliament. You may be aware that in 1980 there was a scandal in the United States called Abscam. Senator Harrison Williams was caught by the FBI in 1980, convicted in 1981 while sitting in the Senate, and stayed in the Senate for a full year until the Ethics Committee didn't remove him, but he resigned because fellow senators would not remove him just days before the sentencing. And my question both to you and to the Prime Minister is the following. Is Ukraine not sometimes, because of the deep corruption, being held to a completely different standard of unreasonableness in how it is assessed for its progress? Because it seems to be that time is required if justice is to be served.
Forgive my rudeness, Prime Minister, but I'm going to plead the fifth because I know people have come here to listen to the Prime Minister, not to me. So honestly, I don't flatter myself that my opinions count for anything, but the Prime Ministers do. So, Prime Minister, you respond.
I have to follow your example and take this 62nd article of the Ukrainian Constitution and remain silent, but I won't be silent. I think that the imposing of the idea that everything is lost in Ukraine is a strategy of fighting Ukraine and against the success of Ukraine. In reality, you cannot blame those who are victims of this information aggression, because propaganda, especially the propaganda of our enemy, is rather efficient, and we can assess this because there's PR in the democratic world, but you cannot fight Goebbels-type propaganda with PR. And we have to spend some time in order to assess what's happening. But if you are talking about this MP first, immunity removed, the electronic bracelet is on his hand. There's a bail set for him, and the examination is going on, and he's nowhere to escape. You could not even imagine this before in Ukraine. MPs would kill people and they won't be arrested. So we can say now that we should reinforce responsibility and provide for the new quality of Ukrainian courts. And I think, and I hope very much, that the new Supreme Court will engage in quality judgment, in quality justice, so that every local court understands that if you pass on unlawful decisions, you will be responsible for this. By the way, the judges in our country are no longer immune to the extent that they used to be. So there's a lot that's been done, but we should crown this with imprisonment of corrupt people. We have taken 2 steps. We shall take the 3rd step. And what I'm telling you is that the discussion whether we should have an anti-corruption chamber or anti-corruption court will only lead to losing some time. I think that justice should be accessible, fast, and real.
Let's take a couple ones. All right, Anders, you have one, and then we'll get one from further back. Yeah. I'll take 2 at once, so quick as you can. Yeah.
Mr. Prime Minister, you have rightly pointed out that you have accomplished a lot. I think that the 2 big questions now for the economies, first of all, the independent anti-corruption court, as mentioned. Second, we have not discussed land market reform. You have been pushing hard for that, but it seems recently that you have given up for it for the time being. How do you see the road forward in this regard? Thank you.
All right, so we'll have one more, and then we'll take 2 at once. So you, sir, yeah.
I am Taras Semenyuk. I work for Short Media Internet publication. Thank you for the chance to ask Mr. Prime Minister of a very practical issue of the Odessa port plant. We are closely following the events around selling this enterprise. We have information that you have arrived at the decision to sell this commodity to Mr. Kolomoisky. At the same time, Mr. Truba, who is an acting director, said that the object will be sold before the year ends. However, later he said that this will happen next year. Can you tell us what's really happening around this plant? Thank you very much for your question. I am interested in a very competitive and open privatization in our country. I'm not interested in controlled privatization because I'm interested in quality investment in my country. And we should involve every quality investor into our country, except people who come from the aggressor country. I do not want to comment on rumors, but I know very well that people who work in the government on privatization will never allow this. As far as privatization is concerned, I think that it is being done unprofessionally, and I don't know about the reason. The work of the state ownership fund has led to the stoppage of this privatization of Odessa port capacity. A couple of days ago, we started the work of the Prozoro system on petty privatization, and then we see that there will be consultants and advisors who will assess the Ukrainian objects and sell them according to competitive tenets. Ukraine is not the country for someone, for the selected people, for everybody who is good.
You backed off land reform.
No, we have not backed off. Moreover, we think that the land reform is extremely important, including for the development of national economy. The government has voiced our absolutely clear-cut position. We are working with the World Bank and our partners, and we have voiced the form and the mode of land relations that we are going to introduce in our country. I want to underline that this should happen in the interests of Ukrainians. This is a very delicate reform. We have never backed off. We are conducting clarifications and communications. We want every person in the country to understand what is this reform about, and people should get clear-cut guarantees that the Ukrainian land won't be possessed by people from abroad. I also want this to be a firm instrument of developing the Ukrainian farmer sector. I think that the issue of farmer sector is an important foundation for the development. We do not reject the big business, but I will support those who are farming the land directly. By the way, in our next year program, we provide for the very clear-cut support of farms in Ukraine. This is going to be an unprecedented program. Yesterday, I presented it in at the government.
The gentleman there has been very patient, and then we'll take one from over here. So you first, sir, and then we'll come over here. But they've got to be brief.
Thank you, Gleb Vyshinsky, the Center of Economic Strategy. Mr. Prime Minister, you have now 3 years experience of being in the national level politics. How would you see the more managed system where the new authority does not lose so fast the trust of the people? If you wake up tomorrow with a new constitution, what will be the balance of powers? Thank you very much. Just one amendment. Not 3 years I have spent, not already 3 years, just only 3 years I spent at the national level of politics. Sometimes I get sad because of the quality of our nation level politics, because for 11 years I worked at the local level, and I think that we had some very good successes at the local level, and I think that we need some success like this at the national level. We don't have ideal system, but I do not need a new constitution. I need a stable majority in the Ukrainian parliament. This is the only thing that we need. And then, with every month, with every half year, Ukrainians will wake up in a forecastable country where the economy is growing and where there's the rule of law. I need 226 votes in the parliament, and the success will be ours.
I promised one last question over here, so...
I take that, Stephen. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for taking my question. Stephen, good to see you again. My name is Martin Schumacher. I'm the CEO of Metro Cash & Carry, a large retailer, and to my information, the largest German investor in the country. I've been here 4 years. I share your hopes and your dreams for Ukraine. But unfortunately, from my perspective, business is getting more difficult for us, not easier, despite us being a very large, transparent, tax-paying organization. And Without corruption, you have a lot of state agencies that are very aggressive in so many ways, and that does not support what we want to do. And while that could be our problem, we are now at the decision point to invest a lot more money in this country. And I have to say my enthusiasm is somewhat muted at this point. So I just want you to know this from my perspective. Thank you.
And a quick comment to that from you, Prime Minister, then we must end.
Ukraine is a country which currently is absolutely profitable for investments. Of course, we are going through the path of transforming the institutions, and the people that are present here can confirm this. We are open to the dialogue on the business. My task is for your investment to be successful. I don't need the scope or scale of your investment. I want your investment to be successful. If your assets will grow, it will mean that the assets of our country will grow. This is my philosophy. And this is something that I'm ruled by. A few days ago, there was a 3-hour meeting of the President, and I participated in that meeting with business associations, European, American, Ukrainian business associations. And we have set a number of steps that would allow us to change the situation for better. But we will continue deregulation as well. And I can tell you that in tax administration, the situation is changing. I think you can confirm this if you will give the real perspective from business. The situation, if changed, will change only for better. And we know that some of the law enforcement entities are trying to take over some of the mandates, which is not natural to them. Those who will be infringing on the business interest will be eliminated and destroyed. And this is a very important element. This country is not the country of the control entities and bodies. This is the country of business. And we have to follow the common healthy logic as it is done in the developed democracies. We have challenges, but we are addressing them, and you will be feeling the progress. For example, the customs already started working in a different manner. The tax authority started working differently as well. Just days from now, there will be a ban on any law enforcement to come with audits and checks. You have to check with your brains and not with your physical strength. And deregulation will continue. Privatization will be open. Public procurement is full transparent access. Land legislation is quite good to do business, although there are still problems. We are going to serve the investments and make sure that you feel comfortable.
Right. Well, Mr. Prime Minister, I must close our session right now, but I can't close it without thanking you very much indeed. I must say I appreciate it as the head of government coming here, taking all of my questions, all of the questions from the floor. You've done it before. I hope you'll do it again. I always enjoy it. And may I thank you very much for coming to this year's conference. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. On my behalf, I would like to thank you for very hot discussions and for the questions that we heard. And the most important, year after year, you're assembling the friends here in this room, and everyone wishes for the better of Ukraine. And maybe those who are skeptical are forced to be skeptical among our partners in relation to Ukraine. I wish we could inflame them a little bit by our ideas and by our results, to transfer them from pessimists into the optimist category. And we have to believe in Ukraine and stick together. The name of the forum is Yes, so let's say yes to Ukraine, and everything will be good.
Thank you very much indeed. Prime Minister, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay here.